Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? I'm having an interesting conversation today with Complex Games Apologist, and we were talking about, various things, including, the various creative agendas. And I've been going back and reading some of those articles or essays by Ron Edwards in The Forge once again because, every time I experience something different. It's been my habit to kind of go back to those and check them out again. And I noticed things that I did not notice before. And 2 years ago, I would have not given you a wooden nickel for the big model and all that sort of stuff. But I found over time that stuff to be more and more relevant to game design and to game experience. And so here we were talking about this sort of stuff, and he mentioned the idea of, like, if you're going to play the wizard, you might as well play the wizard well. And I thought to myself for a second, and it's like, well, it depends. Like, is your intention to play the wizard, or is your intention to be the character that happens to be a wizard? And your answer to that question will determine, whether or not you care about some things. And I made a video some time ago about the linear fighter quadratic wizard problem, which is, if you're not aware of that, and this is not a Dungeons and Dragons video, by the way, that in D&D, particularly in newer versions of D&D, especially like I think in the 3.5 Pathfinder era, one of the conundrums was, over time, while the fighter increased in power in a sort of linear fashion, the wizard did a much more zero to hero, where they had this, very, much steeper curve, to the point where when they were at a particular level, the fighter was much less powerful than the wizard, and the wizard became very, very, very relevant. And I've made some videos, talking about how to keep fighters a little bit more competent in older games. However, one of the things I realized is, like, I don't care. I really don't care. If I'm playing a fighter, if I decide I'm going to play this particular guy, then I really don't care if he becomes second fiddle to the other character. If I'm playing a wizard, I really don't care if I'm playing him in the optimal manner. Why I show up to the table is to experience more of, like, what is it like to be the character? What is it more? What is it like to explore this situation, this setting, this genre? Those are the kind of things that float my boat, that keep me coming to the game table. It is less about playing the wizard and playing them optimally. So I realized that there are concerns that other people have, which are not bad concerns, but I realize that my intentions for showing up and role-playing are different than other people's. So there are problems in games, or discussions in games, which I realize I simply don't care about because they are irrelevant to me and to my enjoyment of role-playing. And it got me thinking about some other things. In All for One, I've certainly created a character who is very good at fighting with a sword. Philippe Moreau, I looked and it wasn't about winning, it wasn't about creating a really super competent character so I could do super competent things, in an advantageous way. It was more like I had this idea. I want to play a guy that's really the musketeer's musketeer, lots of swashbucklery and really physically competent. So I was able to create a character like that. But in the context of this game, Philippe often plays second fiddle to the other characters. He has much weaker motivations. Weaker is maybe not the right word, but Martin has incredibly strong motivation to get revenge against his family and to take back his rightful seat as the head of the family. When Jean-Marie, Null Inquisitor's character, was there, he had a very strong motivation to kill the Beauvais werewolf. Now that his character has kind of completed his arc, Null Inquisitor has moved on, that character is no longer in the campaign, we are left with Martin's very strong motivation, and I'm finding it very compelling. I even mentioned, I think in a recap video, to kind of tag along, to follow that character as his friend, and explore, just kind of tag along for that motivation. Yes, Philippe has the motivation to matter, but he's friends, so like I'm perfectly okay with playing Philippe in this this second fiddle sort of manner as he tags along with Martin, figuring out how to get his rightful place back, and to kick the butt of the Martel and the Beauvais families. So that should be kind of fun. Even when I was playing in and once again I'm talking D&D, even though this isn't a D&D video, I played in a game of Play by Post years and years ago that I talk about every once in a while, where I played a fighter. There were a couple other people that played like a paladin and a ranger, and even though there were some XP differences in terms of how fast you level up, if you put everything down on paper, I was probably the least competent character in the group. But I didn't care. That's not what I showed up. I liked playing Aprax. I liked playing in that group, in that situation, and we role-played the best we could in play-by-post. And it made me think. I actually cut this video, kind of said that, and stopped and realized, well, I want to add some other things I was thinking about, because I just had a discussion yesterday. We had a roundtable, or kind of like a session zero for Uncharted Worlds, and Eloy and Sam and Jason and I all sat there and talked about, hammered out some things, and just talked about some impressions of the game so far. And one of the things I talked about in this game, I really liked the idea that you can create kind of a character and there's no real playbook, so you can kind of make an archetype that you want. And in a game like The Veil and a lot of other PBTA games, I'm not criticizing them, but one of the things that I ran into was a lot of the playbooks that you'll see in there, they are kind of single, they suggest stories where there's a single main character, and they maybe have an entourage, maybe they're a loner, but you have a whole bunch of archetypes in there that, like, how are these people really going to work together? And in fact, that's the old paladin assassin problem, or not even paladin assassin. Maybe not, if not even characters that are at loggerheads, but you play in a lot of role playing games, and I'm going to pick on D&D again. Oftentimes what you end up with a bunch of people that are main characters, and they're all together, and that's kind of bizarre. I don't mind, and in fact I really enjoy many times playing a supporting character, not necessarily supportive mechanically, although that's kind of fun too, but supporting in terms of, they're Martin's friend. And, what is that like? So once again, to me, I don't necessarily show up to play the wizard, to play the super competent musketeer. I show up to be Philippe Moreau, who happens to be a musketeer. I show up, to be Duras, who happens to be a wizard. And Duras was a pretty bad wizard, meaning evil. But that's more what I show up. I show up to experience the genre. I show up to experience the situations, the whole tone and the feel of the game, the setting. What is it like to be that character in that world? What is it like when this situation happens? What is it like in a Paris during the 30 Years' War, when there's more going on than just the Cardinal's Guards? There's some more nefarious things. That, to me, is where my excitement is generated and my interest is generated, not in playing the game. So, and there's nothing wrong with that, but just different intentions, different motivations. So there are issues that I find that I care less about, because to me they're irrelevant. What do you think about that? Does that make sense?